Hey people, so I'm back. So part two, I'm talking about how amnesia saved my life. Now, for those that have been through similar events, whether it was a traumatic event, it's not necessarily pertaining to sexual trauma, but in my story, it is, okay? It's sexual trauma. It could be different for everybody. But the way my mind was conceived, it was that amnesia helped me overlook that traumatic event and enabled me to push forward as it pertains to being ambitious, overlooking what people felt, like one thing I want to say, okay, in the dynamics that were enabled out of that childhood traumatic event, there was a lot of power dynamics where people felt superior to me or felt that they had this overhand, or this, they felt overpowered over me, or over empowered over me because they had a part of my story that I did not remember, or that I did not recall because I had amnesia regarding that traumatic event. So it was funny to see how, people always thought that they could, give me advice, treat me a certain way, talk to me a certain way, disregard me a certain way, devalue me a certain way. And, I always felt like I was different, or I always felt like I had a treatment that was different, but I could not pinpoint as to why. Okay. And all my life, like I had to, overcompensate for something that I thought that it was my fault. Because even when, like I said, I was not sexually ashamed, or although at some point I kind of felt like, especially when I was in my last relationship, I felt like I needed to make myself small. That's one of the big insecurities that I had to fight in order to reclaim all of my power, was to understand that, one part of my insecurity was that I was making myself small. Because when I was trying to shine, when I was trying to stand out and to be all that I felt like I was, it was my birthright to be, to shine, to be beautiful, to be recognized, to be intelligent, to show my intelligence. I felt like I was being frowned upon and laughed upon, because again, people had part of my story that I did not integrate or acknowledged because of my amnesia. So I always felt like I needed at some point to make myself smaller. Like I needed to silence myself. I needed not to share my opinions. I needed not know, so this, okay. In this second part, I'm going to talk about how amnesia saved my life, especially in the first part of my life where I was growing up. Right. So I had all the fire energy and the creative energy to do many, many things in my life and not be stuck in a hole of reliving memories of that past or that past event. So the first half of my life, I would say that amnesia helped and saved my life greatly, because it helped me forge a character. It helped me, develop many, many skills. Like, I went for many, many skills. So I have a bachelor degrees. I have several certificates. I am a doula or a birth coach. I am a herbalist as well. And I still went and thrived for more. I always wanted more because, again, I was trying to overcompensate. But at the same time, I always felt like, I had a higher calling. I had a higher calling to help others around me, right? And then the second part of my life, that's where amnesia, right, in the first half of my life was something that was a tool, because it helped me, overlook certain habits, certain aspects of myself. But then in the second part of my life, that amnesia is like I would say, the analogy that I want to make here is, it's like you throw a hammer, okay, into the wall, and then there's a crack, okay? And then in that crack, right, when you're small, you have a crack in the wall, you're going to see that crack and you're like, oh my God, I can store some messages in there. So let me store some messages in there, right? You're going to write some small messages, some coins, and then you're going to drop those small coins and those small paper folded messages in that crack. And you're going to store them in that crack. And that crack is going to become, your secret or your safe space or your safe haven where, that only you know that there is this crack in the wall that was done with this hammer that was thrown in the wall, right? And you utilize it to, to whatever, to your advantage, right? But in the second part of your life, as you grow up, you realize there is a crack in the wall. Understand? There is a crack in the wall and somebody's going to have to fix it. Okay. In the second part of my life, right, I started questioning myself. Why was I not, why were my relationships never working? Or why was I not ever, really able to be in a blossoming relationship? Why was I attracting certain people? And in my last relationship, right, the person that I was with realized that there was a crack in the wall. Okay. And that person utilized that crack in the wall to plant in seeds. So that person started writing messages. Oh my God, let me stop. So that person started writing messages, right? Started folding those papers and started putting them in that crack as well. Okay. So that crack, I'm referring that crack to my subconscious mind. Okay. And in that subconscious mind was that memory of that childhood abuse that I had folded, put it in a box and put it in that crack. Okay. And in that crack, I was safe for the first half of my life where, I did not have to take accountability. I was, thriving for the ego aspects of myself of, wanting to pursue things, wanted to achieve things, wanted to, look a certain way, present myself with a personality. So the first half of my life, that crack was beneficial for me in, standing in my ego. Okay. But in the second part of my life, especially with that last relationship where I was in, that person realized that there was a crack in my subconscious, right? And that person utilized that crack in order to seep in ideas, in order to seep in illusions, in order to create a story that was not necessarily mine, but had seen the crack in the wall, had seen that, oh, she was traumatized from her childhood. Let me utilize this in order to break her down even more. Okay. So at some point I hit the wall and I realized that the crack in the wall was, yes, allowing me to live in my ego, but was not allowing me to live in alignment with all parts of myself. Meaning I had an inner child that was wounded, right? Because I was not taking care of her. I was not listening to her cries, to her pain, right? I was not acknowledging it because I had put it in the box. Hey, you're stored in the wall. You're in that crack. Bye. So I was overlooking the inner child within me that was wounded, that was, trying to find someone who was going to see, right? The crack in the wall was actually someone that had taken advantage of her, right? But I did not want to see it because, again, I had amnesia, or that's how my mind dealt with it. So I put it in the box and I threw it in the crack. So I was not dealing with my inner child that was heavily wounded. I was also overlooking my higher self that was giving me glimpses and clues as to what I needed to deal with. But again, I was in my ego trying to uphold the image, right? For the rest of the world to see that, oh my gosh, she's such a cutie. She's so much this. She's so much that. She's so much, normal. But I was never normal. And it's until I hit that wall with that person that I was able to realize that, oh my God, I need to deal with my own inner child wounding, right? And it's until that I got re-traumatized in the last relationship that the box came out of the crack And I was able to open the box and be like, oh my God, this was what happened to me when I was younger. And in the beginning, like the first memory, the first ever memory of that childhood trauma, I was watching a sports game. Trigger warning over here. I was watching a sports game. And the animator or the person on TV that, explains the sports game, whoever that person is. So the voice, he was just talking about that game. And then a memory just flashed into my mind. And I was like, oh my God, I was abused when I was young. That's what I said out loud. And I was like, no, for real. I was abused when I was young. And I told that to the person that I was with back then. And, he was like, oh yeah, for real? I was like, yeah. But it felt like that person already knew. Okay. That person had already insights because, again, people in my environment knew the backstory to what had happened, and they felt that they had leverage over me. And that person as well had some form of insights as to what had happened and played heavily on that in order to try to, keep me in that wall, or actually literally, just have me, crash into that wall and want to hide myself in that hole as well. But again, this is not what happened. So I was able to get that memory out of that crack, unravel it, and be like, oh my God, this is what happened to me. So I started doing the work. I started doing the shadow work as to, why was the habits that I was still dragging along with me, where were they coming from? I was able to identify that over-sexuality was not something that was normal, right? That it was something that was done through this and through that. And then I could, put my finger on it and be like, okay, now there's a name for this. There's a name for that repercussion. There's a name for that. There's a name for this. I understand that pattern. I understand that habit. I understand that I was heavily walking in my ego for the first half of my life. And I understood that my inner child was crying out loud to me that you need to deal with this. You need to deal with this. You need to deal with this. Right? And that amnesia in that second part of my life was no longer needed. I no longer needed to hide that memory in that crack, in that wall. So when I dealt with it, I realized that I had attracted a whole lot of people that were in my life for the wrong reasons. They just wanted leverage. They just wanted to harvest energy. They just wanted to utilize my strong sexual energy at their own expense, at their own advantage. Use them for their own interests, for their own goals, right? For their own objective, for their own, achievements. And I can stand in my power today and say, I've helped a lot of people see, or I helped a lot of people get to where they wanted to go in their life. Okay. Yes, I did put myself last. I did put my goals and dreams last because I felt like I needed to prove to the world, because again, I was walking my ego that I was normal, but I was never normal. So I did a lot of healing, a lot of shadow work, because again, like I said, in my last relationship, I had attracted someone that was well versed in, in the arts, in the dark arts of, manipulating energies and manipulating the mind, right? The ego mind, the higher self mind, the subconscious mind, the conscious mind. That was someone that was well versed, that had the dark arts knowledge and utilized it to really crush me down. But in trying to crush me down is like that crushing or that pressure, brought that treasure box out of the wall, where I was able to look at it and be like, oh wow, this is what happened to me. And so I was carrying a lot of guilt. I was carrying a lot of shame in that box. So although, my conscious and my ego self wanted to show that I was, I was on top of my game, that I was going after the things that I wanted, that I was, the super woman, or, the super strong person, the super helpful person, the super whatever have you, I realized that I was carrying a lot of guilt, a lot of shame for my sexuality, for my sexual needs, because I could not understand where was it coming from. How come I had so much sexual energy? Not to say that it's in that event that I attracted a lot of sexual energy. No. I came into this earth, into this dimension with a lot of sexual power. And because I was not brought up in a safe environment with people that had eyes over me, watching me, making sure that nobody was taking advantage of that power. No, I was brought up in an environment where people would take advantage of these things and try to put me in situations where people would harness that power, literally. So I was able to understand that I've come into this earth with great power, and people try to play on that power many, many ways. So I had to dismantle the shit. Like I had to break down a whole lot of stuff. I'm going to end it here, and then we're going to end it in the next video. Okay.